currently in 0% of Yahoo leagues. So Trent Cannon ended up being an acquisition from the Baltimore Ravens. He got released after week 1. He ended up being plugged right into the 49ers system, and I doubt that they were trying to use him as a runner at any point in this game. Sure enough, he ended up getting 1 carry for -1 yards, but basically, this is just a prospective ad because in the event that Elijah Mitchell is actually banged up or hasty and Sermon can't give it a go, there's nobody else in that 49ers running game to pick up any of the work whatsoever. And Trent Cannon is at least a somewhat serviceable running back, I think, ? But number 5 here, it's really not going to cost you anything to be able to go pick him up on the wire. Definitely do not be using a number 1 or number 2 priority to go get him or, anything substantial whatsoever in your fab budget. But Trent Cannon, he's somebody to at least have on your radar in the event that this 49ers run situation is just completely broken like it looks like. At number 4, this is another perspective ad here because the running game for the
All right, welcome into the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Week 2 nearly in the books, and we have a lot to look back on a really busy Sunday. Some ups, some MVPs of the weekend, and some downs, including a bunch of injuries that we're going to have to sift through. It is a Monday, so we're going to get you prepared, fully prepared, on any waiver wire activity where you can get ahead in your season-long fantasy football leagues. And we'll tell you all about an amazing opportunity to take advantage of what we're doing with Yahoo here as well. New users are going to get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum with your first deposit and first paid contest entry. Just keep using that 2 free months again of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Here's the deal. It's myself, Ben Rasa, Dave Loffy's in the house as well. So at Loffy_D, at JazzRazDFS, at Shander Show for me. And gentlemen, a bunch of injuries. We're definitely going to focus on some negative, but we thought we would start on a positive note at the very least before we just get inundated with guys going down. It was like the VA out there over the weekend. Everybody in every game, it felt like, was at risk of going down. So we'll start on some positive stuff at least first. But look, we're almost done with week 2. We're trucking along. Pretty good things so far going on with this show.
Speak for yourself, man.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, well, should we start over? Should we have Chris bring the intro back in? And should I say what a shitty weekend it was for our season-long fantasy football teams and how desperate we need to work the waiver wire, Loffy? Is that easier for you?
To be fair, season-long was phenomenal. I'm not going to lie. I've just been crushing season-long league. But the DFS streets the first 2 weeks have not been kind to me. I'll tell you that much. And, it's all the same thing in the end. So, look. It happens. It was a strange week. The level of parity in the NFL, P-A-R-I-T-Y.
Right.
Just to clarify that, the level of parity in the NFL right now is off the charts. Like, it is through the roof, and it's going to happen, right? And you're going to have good weeks. You're going to have bad weeks. That's why season long is great, because you essentially just play your best players every week. In DFS, though, it's a different ball game, and there are just going to be spots that look great and you completely whiff. And other spots that don't look good and you whiff by not getting to them. And, of course, the injury bug was pretty prominent yesterday. And while quarterbacks, generally speaking, were mostly QB2 guys that you'd be talking about in Superflex or 2 QB leagues, their absence has a heavy trickle-down effect to their pass catchers, to their running backs, pretty much everything if the offense stalls out in the event that they go down.
The injuries definitely hurt. DFS was actually all right. The betting side for me, a couple teams got there, but the props were just not my week. A couple guys got hurt right under their numbers. A couple others just were no-shows. I'm with you, though, Luffy. Ironically, my season-long team's actually so far so good. Minimal major injuries. Everything is going nice there, but a little frustration. We're going to right the ship, and we're going to dive into, because this week felt like truly a lot of teams suffered, maybe not catastrophic injuries, but things we have to be aware of as we get into week 3.
Yeah, I think looking at our biggest takeaways, we're going to talk about some MVPs that won the weekend either for us or just overall, and some guys to keep an eye on, especially after maybe a breakout performance that was needed following nothing week one or just being on our radars as a whole. But we will talk a lot about the injuries and get some more questions and concerns that you have on the chat. Smash that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed, of course, to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. So let's start again with some positivity at least, and we can look at an MVP and then maybe a guy that we either weren't expecting to have a breakout or had enough of a performance at least to where it's worth right here. So let's start with you, Lofty. Let's start with your MVP over the weekend.
Oh, it's Derrick Henry. There are some really good ones, don't get me wrong, but Derrick Henry for me is the clear, surefire MVP of week 2, and I don't know how to get around that. I mean, let's think about this. The guy touched the ball 41 times, okay? He had 35 carries, 182 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, if you're looking at this offense as a whole, too, you'd say, oh, yeah, but, I mean, that sucks for the passing game. Not really. Ryan Tannehill was chucking it as well. He tossed the ball over 40 times as well. But what I loved about Derrick Henry wasn't just the 3 scores or the 182 yards on the ground or the 35 rushing attempts, but he tied Julio Jones for the team lead in targets, and he had 6 receptions on the day, which also led the team 55 yards receiving. And the funny thing is about him, Matt Kajeski and I talked about this on the DFS channel today during our Showdown strategy show, that the crazy thing about Henry is it's not like he's even a bad pass catcher. It's not like he has a crazy high drop rate. It's not like he can't create yards after the catch, which he did yesterday on multiple occasions. And it's not like Jeremy McNichols is some, incredible pass catching back destined for greatness and James White type success at the position. None of that is true. So consider this. If Derrick Henry continues, he's not going to get 35 carries, 41 touches every week. But if Derrick Henry continues to see some involvement in the passing game, right? This was by far the most receptions that he has ever had, right? In a game. Right. He had 3 receptions in week 1 last year. Other than that, no more than 2 in a game. He had twice the season prior to that. No more than that before. No more than 3 targets in a game. 6 targets, okay? And now he has 10 targets in 2 games. Derrick Henry goes from like the 3rd or 4th pick in redraft leagues. Forget about PPR or standard at this point. If he can average even 4 targets a game, Derrick Henry no doubt could finish as the PPR 1 back in standard, half point, and full point PPR at this pace.
It's weird because, when I was looking before the season, Derrick Henry's targets have gone up every year of his career. It seems like I don't know. Let me ask you guys, do you think it's because they want to limit his already absurd volume and they figure, okay, we can find other guys to kind of utilize that pass catching role. We don't want to give that to him.
Absolutely.
Too, because clearly he can do it. You're right. It's just, they seem like they don't want that to happen considering the guy's already got 35 carries in the game.
But like, what if he is their best pass catching back and the offensive line is clearly a problem right now? So do you just say, you know what? We got to give him 35 carries and we got to give him 5 targets if he's open.
That seems.
I think the touches are. I guess my response to that would be game flow, and I know that sounds somewhat like a cop out, but we know the game flow for him running the ball is not going to change. They could be down 10 points. He's got that breakout. We saw it yesterday against the Seahawks, that huge run. So I think from the running and the attempt standpoint, it was just a matter of time before he bounced back. Everybody bounced back from that horrific week 1. But to your point about catching and targeting, I think that games are going to allow for him to be more involved if, in fact, they continue to throw the football to where there's not some set number where he's on some sort of pitch count for targets.
So just the last thing I have on this is if the pass blocking is as bad as it has looked through the first 2 weeks, and it does not look particularly good at all, then if you want him on the field, you're going to see a little bit more Derrick Henry. Ben's point is 100% correct. And so is yours, Eytan, like game flow. Yes, if you're playing with the lead, there's no reason to target Derrick Henry, right? There isn't much reason to target a lot of running backs outside of like the McCaffreys and the Camaras when you don't need to. But yeah, if they're locked in to shootouts, which I imagine you're going to see a lot of that this season because they have a good, efficient offense, but bad pass blocking and a middle-of-the-road defense. All I'm saying is 4 targets per game from Derrick Henry makes a pretty significant difference just in his long-term projection, because if he's adding even 5 points on receptions each week, that's adding 5 points to already hefty totals every single Sunday.
All right, Rasa, who's your MVP of the weekend?
I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. Just, again, this Rams offense, they looked unbelievable against the Bears. And then you get into a situation, Cooper Kupp just dominated again. 9 catches, $163, 2 touchdowns. You know, I think there was a lot of questions about, A, how would Stafford look? And then B, where would the targets break down? How would Woods and Van Jefferson in the backfield and Cooper Kupp and Higbee all coexist? And who would be that priority guy? It's only a couple of weeks, but it seems like Cooper Kupp is thriving. He's healthy. Everything is firing. And Sean McVay, of course, is able to get him the ball. And with these other weapons, it isn't a team. When I look at the Rams, I don't think other defenses are saying, okay, we have to take away Cooper Kupp, and that's all we got to worry about. If you do that, they've got ample other guys that are really going to step up. And I think that ability to keep defenses honest, we're going to see some big-time games. He was a must-have in DFS yesterday. It's one of the many reasons that I had some issues because I didn't get to him as much as I should have. But there's no doubting that he is set up to have a monster year if he stays healthy.
You know, I talked about this on the Sunday on yesterday's deeper dive with you and Alex, Ben. And the one thing I was most interested in was, will Cooper Kupp be targeted more on the deep ball? Now, I'm not expecting 3 20-plus yard targets every game, but he now has 2 deep targets, so 1 each week, right? He now has 2 deep targets and 100 yards and a touchdown on deep balls this season. He has been targeted in the red zone touchdown yesterday, has a marked improvement at quarterback than he did last year, a guy who's willing to sling the ball downfield, but can also hit him on those tight windows, even, 15 yards downfield across the middle of the field. Cooper Kupp, and this is, I've been banging this drum all year, but also it was an unknown. Like, there's a lot that you're wrong on when it comes to trying to project these things. It looks like we're going to be right, as of now, assuming everybody stays healthy, on Cooper Kupp, because A, he is that good, and it appears that Sean McVay's idea to give up a lot to get Matthew Stafford is paying big dividends already.
Yeah, I don't see how anybody else is taking away. We talked about Van right at the start, week 1. Robert Woods, there was some concern about how consistent he'd get the football. Cooper Kupp is the one guy where there's not going to be any targets or volume taken away from him. He was instrumental. I say was because Nick still has one guy left, but hey, Cooper Kupp powered or is powering my victory in the Awesemo C League this week against Nick Lepre. So I'm rolling all day and every day with Cooper Kupp as my number one guy. And it's just refreshing to see that, because I think I just go back to this whole thing where if Woods has a big day, if Higbee has a big day, somebody else can have a big day, but it's not going to take away, at least so far, from Kupp.
That's the thing you were talking about, Luffy, too. They're high efficiency deep balls. Like, some guys, they get a couple deep passes, but the probability of success is so low, it's not valuable. In this Rams offense, these are such quality targets each and every time. He's going to convert a much higher percentage than your average deep ball just because of the way this offense is designed. So the table is set. Cooper Kupp and this Rams team in an elite, just a ridiculous division where the Seahawks are the only team that have a loss so far. You're going to need him to be active in those divisional games, and I expect he will be.
Yeah, and one more thing just to consider about Cooper Kupp. You guys will find this, you should find this interesting, and you should see this as just an illustration of what type of impact Matthew Stafford has. Last year, Cooper Kupp had a 20% air yards target, right? I know it's early in the season, and you'll see this balance maybe a little bit. 20% of his team's air yards. This year, he has 37% of his team's air yards. What a huge difference that is for a guy that can already be a PPR monster. I mean, this is, Ben, you can tell me if this is an exaggeration or if this is hyperbole here. But I could see Cooper Kupp finishing as a top 7 fantasy receiver this year in PPR formats if they continue it even close to this pace.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the team more than him, to be honest. The Rams have to be this good for that to happen, but I don't think it's a stretch to think that the Rams might be amongst the best teams in the league.
Yeah, and the best passing teams in the league.
Yeah.
Yes, passing teams. Yeah, Chronic Smith, Stafford died and went to heaven. Absolutely. Just getting out of Detroit, you could argue, is...
Yeah, the 49ers backfield just died.
Yes, we'll talk about them. Let me hit you with one more MVP. And the guy is now leading the league in passing yardage. When you look at the touchdowns, I think they will come. But for Derek Carr and what he's been doing, especially this offense that wasn't as reliant as maybe people thought on Darren Waller from the majority of that game, Derek Carr has been outstanding. And especially when you look at in the groupings from passing yardage, and again, the touchdowns are going to come. There's some things, Kirk Cousins in a shootout, Jameis Winston all coming in week 1. I don't have a concern that those touchdowns won't come, and we start looking, especially if the passing is consistent. But Derek Carr now, 2 weeks in a row, throwing the football with confidence, definitely blowing me away as far as what he's been able to do, as well as leading his team to 2 victories. So I would throw Carr in there as well as an MVP conversation, because maybe he's not as expected to be up there as a Patrick Mahomes, as a Josh Allen, as a Lamar Jackson. So I thought from Carr's standpoint alone, putting himself in the conversation was worthy of a mention.
Damn right. Dude's done it against 2 good defenses as well. Granted, Baltimore's corners are banged up. That's understandable, but they're still a decent enough defense. And then Pittsburgh defense, I'm on here yesterday on our DFS channel talking about how scary and vaunted the Steelers defense is. Don't get me wrong, I still think they're good. But Derek Carr has been good. Like, even last year, he was not bad at all. And he basically just had Darren Waller to throw to. And, Nelson Aguilar, sure. But Henry Ruggs was a non-factor. Who knows what's going to happen with Bryan Edwards? But the biggest thing for Derek Carr is if Henry Ruggs ends up being legit and you have Darren Waller, this team is going to be really scary offensively. And last thing I'll say is after 2 weeks, there are very few things across the league that I can say with any certainty. Like, Tampa Bay still has a really good team and Brady's still amazing. Arizona's offense looks unstoppable to some extent. They look very good. The Jets and Jaguars are still dog shit. But outside of that, there have been so many week 1 to week 2 differences between so many of these teams. The Saints, for example, and I won't run down the whole list, that we go into week 3 with so many question marks after thinking we knew a little bit of something after week 1. Small sample size sports are tough.
Yeah, particularly NFL. These teams, no doubt about it. When they drafted Ruggs, it wasn't that I thought he was terrible. It was just I couldn't think of a worse guy to utilize with Derek Carr specifically. And he has shown that he can make those throws and he can utilize Ruggs' speed. That bomb to Ruggs yesterday was fantastic, and that's just something I didn't think they have. So if they can get him, certainly Waller is Waller. He's a matchup nightmare. Drake, gives them something even without Jacobs. I'm still not sold that the Raiders are any good, to be honest. 2 really impressive wins, and it looks a hell of a lot better when Baltimore beats the Chiefs. That's obviously, that just shows the NFL, though, is kind of ridiculous with that. Very impressive start. Derek Carr looks great. I'd be lying, though, if I said that I'm ready to anoint him just yet. I know you guys aren't saying that, but I'm still a little skeptical that the Raiders, and Carr specifically, are off to some ridiculous trajectory. Whereas, like Stafford and the Rams, I put that in the category of the Bucs and those teams. They're going to be good.
All right, it wasn't all good. Speaking of which, a bunch of injuries. And a reminder here, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. And take advantage. New Yahoo users, 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum with your first deposit and first paid entry in your contest. You cannot beat that. $90-some-odd a month, right, Lofty?
Yeah, $89.99 is monthly value.
$89.99. Okay.
Yeah, it's a dumb deal. Like, it really is. I mean, it's dumb in the sense
we're giving money away.
Yeah, if you don't do it, like if you're not signed up at Yahoo yet, the Daily Fantasy Sports, first of all, it's fun and it's softer than any of these other big sites. That's the big thing. It's soft. Our own Matt Kajeski was saying, like, if you're not playing Yahoo Cash, and I'm not, so I have to start. If you're not playing Yahoo Cash games right now, you're throwing money away. So all you have to do is deposit $10, play one tournament or play one contest. And even if you want the tools right away and you didn't play a contest yet, but you deposited $10, just email us at support@awesemo.com. Get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Everything: football, baseball, hockey, PGA, NASCAR, UFC, esports. Seriously, everything. Tennis. It's everything. If they have contests for it, we have content for it. Tools, everything created by the #1 ranked DFS player in the world. It's seriously the best deal in the DFS space you're going to get all year, maybe ever.
That's amazing just to see that right there. And we have it here for you today. So if you're in the chat and you just heard Lofty explain all of that and you're not a Yahoo DFS player, there's only so much we can do for you. There's only so much in which we can nudge you in the right direction. Look, everybody got hurt yesterday, right? I mean, everybody at some point, it felt like the entire NFL had to miss some time, be it a snap or an entire rest of the game. Quarterbacks aplenty went down from Chicago to Indianapolis. We know Baker Mayfield hurt a little bit. So where to begin? I mean, Lofty, if you want to just kind of focus on maybe a biggest area of concern, so much is going to be on the quarterbacks, I know, first and foremost, but we had a ton, including, as you mentioned, that Niners backfield that we spent a couple of days last week talking about, with Elijah Mitchell expected to get the majority of the work share on Sunday. So if it's Carson Wentz, if it's Baker Mayfield, or maybe even Andy Dalton at the top, the quarterback position took a pretty big hit yesterday.
Huge hit. But unless you're playing in Superflex leagues, unless you're playing in 2 quarterback leagues or just really deep leagues, you're not really worried about this. Now, I'll say 2 things. One, like Baker Mayfield's back, he's fine. Carson Wentz now has sprained. How do you sprain both ankles? Like, that only happens if you jump off of a surface that's too high. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know how it happens on a single play in a football game.
Did you see the game?
Yeah.
It was pretty
He
bad.
threw an interception on a shovel pass,
Dude,
so anything is possible.
It's not just that he threw an interception on a shovel pass. It's that even if he didn't, there was no one there to catch it. He threw it at his center's back.
Yep.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. What I do know is, like I said, you jump off a 2-story building, you jump off a 10-foot surface onto the ground, both ankle sprain. I look at you and I go, you're dumb, but I get how that happened. 2 ankle sprains playing football, God only knows. So that happens, and it's like you're not really starting Carson Wentz, but I was huge on Michael Pittman all year, and Paris Campbell's once again hurt. I'm pretty sure Ben was a Pittman guy as well. The guy has that alpha-type ability, right? We talked about that with Courtland Sutton, and we saw that yesterday that he's healthy. But it hurts Pittman a lot more is the issue, right? Like Jacob Eason threw an interception on his first snap. This is the problem. It's not that you can't play Carson Wentz. It's that now that Tyrod Taylor is out, Brandon Cooks takes a massive hit with Davis Mills in there. And it saddens me because I've kind of always been of the mindset that Tyrod Taylor's not great, but he's also not nearly as bad as people said he was coming into the season. He's always been a league average quarterback, even dating back to the Bills, right? Like, he's been a league average guy, but he got shit on. And he was playing great, man. They were in that game against the Browns as 12-point dogs, bigger than that in some spots. I think it opened at like 13.5.
Oh, I got him at 13.5. I was telling Rasa all week on the Awesemo betting show, jump in.
Yeah, right. I mean, dude, yeah. If Tyrod Taylor stayed healthy, that game's not happening, but it hurts Brandon Cooks.
They might have won it with Taylor healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. He looked good. But, you know, but you think about it, Cooks and Michael Pittman, that's where the overall flow and efficiency of the offense. So it hurts the Jonathan Taylors now, right? It hurts whoever the starting running back is getting the work for Houston. It's just that trickle down effect. And that's kind of what sucks. The biggest thing is the Andy Dalton injury. Justin Fields came in. He stunk it up. But I just can't wait until Andy Dalton is reinserted by Matt Nagy back into the starting lineup in like week 5 after he's healthy, and people go nuts in Chicago.
He already said that, Ben. Did you catch that earlier today, that he's the starting quarterback when healthy?
They always say that.
Wait. I just tweeted, going to be hilarious when Matt Nagy reinserts Andy Dalton into the starting lineup after he gets healthy again. I'm not making this up. 30 seconds after I tweet that, Adam Schefter goes, Bears say Andy Dalton still is their starting QB if healthy.
But this came out this morning. You guys missed that? Like Matt Nagy was under fire because he refused to answer a question about Justin Fields and Andy Dalton, even though it came out earlier from Nagy that, and I guess this was after the game, that Andy Dalton ain't going anywhere as the starting quarterback. I mean, at some point, can't you just, like, at some point, aren't you self-aware that the facade is over and that you are wearing no clothes as the emperor? I mean, doesn't that, as a self-realization, happen at some point?
I don't mind it. Maybe he shouldn't have said anything, but here's how I interpret it. Okay, if Justin Fields is good, he's not going, unless this guy is really, then that's a whole different story. But he just won't bring him back, just like this happens all the time. And if he's bad, then he can say, you see, that's fine. I always said that we're going to go back to Dalton, because there's no way, just like Herbert or Dak Prescott with Romo, like if he's really good, they're not going to go back. Chicago will cease to exist. They would just liquidate the city. They're not going to stand for that if Fields is good. That
is a good point. Coaches do not care if they renege on their prior commitments.
Yeah, if Fields is good, I promise you, they will keep him in there, and they'll just be like, yeah, we have to go with the guy who was recently in the last couple of years. Maybe it was Tyrod Taylor, because he always gets the short end of the stick, where they were just
he got jabbed in the ribs too.
Like, we will go back to Tyrod Taylor. And then Herbert was just good, and they were just like, yeah, well, sorry, had to make the best decision.
I feel like there was another one.
There was.
Well, do you remember years ago here in Philadelphia, Laufey, and maybe, Ben, you were keen to this as well, but Kevin Cobb got hit and suffered a concussion. And Andy Reid came out and said, don't worry, nobody loses their job to injury. And guess who stepped in and took that job right away? Mike Vick. So I feel like with the quarterback position, we see this a lot. And the only difference maker is usually if there's a rookie, like in the case of Fields.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think Nagy is – I don't think the way he presents these things is right, but I do think that he puts himself in a situation now where, like Ben said, if Fields sucks, he's like, I told you, he's not ready. Yeah. And if he's good, he has no problem being like, all right, he's played well enough. Bill Belichick is a perfect example. He said that Cam Newton was going to be the starter, and then he's like, well, it's a competition. We haven't decided yet. He worked backwards. Nobody cares about that, right? All they want is the best player on the field. So if Fields is on your waiver, and he shouldn't be, pick him up right now, because it's the rushing upside. Forget about the fact that he only completed 6 of 13 passes and threw an ugly interception. Look at Jalen Hurts yesterday. They had completed 4 passes in the second half, and the guy still had almost 22 fantasy points. Like, you want the cheat code rushing upside. That's what you want. If Fields is out there, pick him up. But I wouldn't spend too much if you already have a good quarterback, right? Like, if you already have a good starter and you have a short bench, I'd be careful about that, because we don't know what Matt Nagy's going to do.
All right, Ben. Just looking at Tua before we start to look at some other positions here. I know Chad asking about Henderson, but in that kind of vein of what we talked about with Baker Mayfield, Tua is avoiding, serious injury moving forward. But just with you guys looking at another quarterback and the trickle down effect that it has with guys around him, how big of a concern is that now? Or are we still kind of in that Baker Mayfield / not necessarily this ridiculous concern like we are maybe with Carson Wentz?
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge deal. From what I saw, it's ribs, it's a pain tolerance. But regardless of who's under center, I think that Miami's pass catchers and Gaskin, it's not a huge difference, to be honest. Just because Tua, I don't know how effective he was really going to be this season. I think there's real questions about where he's at. In general, you've got Waddle, who – he's a pretty explosive player. They got to get more healthy, and they really could use certainly Will Fuller at times. Maybe it would affect him more and more, but it doesn't seem like a major injury, and I don't think there's a major drop-off. You're not losing an elite top-tier quarterback where it's a massive downgrade to the weapons. To me, of all the guys we're talking about, Wentz to Eason would be the biggest drop-off, and that could be really concerning for Pittman.
Honestly, I think Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills is equally significant with how bad he looked as well.
Yeah,
Mills. You guys are giving Carson Wentz way too much props, man.
No, did you see that throw? He threw it directly to Jalen Ramsey. Directly. I don't know what Eason was looking at, and that's the only tape I've seen of him in the NFL, so that's all I got to go off of.
Wait.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
It's not about giving him credit. It's just surely an indictment on Jacob Eason.
Correct. Yep.
Carson Wentz has at least started games in the NFL. He can at least make you somewhat. Hold on. Wait.
Years ago.
But no, not at all, dude. They faced. You're way off on this, man. They faced the Rams yesterday. Okay, right? It was the Rams. Yeah, Indianapolis and the Rams. And
right.
And that secondary is ferocious. You had Paris Campbell was out, T.Y. Hilton was out, and Michael Pittman Jr., a second-year player who missed games last year, had 11 for 150, 8 for 123 on 12 targets. So the drop-off to me, Wentz isn't that good. He makes bad plays. He sucks in the red zone. But if you can support an 8 for 123 game for Michael Pittman, and I believe most of that production came under Wentz, I think that's pretty significant, honestly. Yeah.
So I'll meet you on that and say that Pittman is definitely the key benefactor from that. But the problem that I see with Wentz is that the decision-making, holding on to the football, especially trying to create something that's not there, that's such a problem because it negates what you were talking about with Jalen Hurts and other guys who can move on the ground, where you've removed, not only have you removed his ability to run, which Carson can, but it's now a negative when he's out there. But you're right. You're not going to find anybody like Pittman, and I'll concede that point, that has benefited from Eason at the very least.
But you had to look at the drop-off, not from good to bad, but in terms of, if you had a Ford Pinto, that sucks, right? And your life is probably in a bad spot. If you drop that, if you lose that Ford Pinto and you have to drive a Fred Flintstone car and propel it with your feet, that's so much worse, even though your initial car was shit, right? Now you're at a spot where you can't move. So, Carson Wentz wasn't good, but Jacob Eason might be that much worse that the offense can't put it together 150 yards in a game.
Is Wentz a Pinto or a Datsun? Duster.
I mean, just take any example you want and then throw it down to a car where you have we have to move it.
Derail.
Tough scene. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I'm just going to throw this out to you on the spot. Name, you get 3 seconds. Who is the Jets' backup quarterback?
Carson Wentz.
That's close. The Jets literally have no backup quarterback that I've ever heard of. His name is Mike White.
Mike White. Is he a made-up guy, like one of your made-up schools?
I was wondering why they didn't potentially pull Zach Wilson, and now I realize that they have no one behind him. So
Wilson's been really, really bad.
Oh, my God.
Brutal.
When you said Jacob Eason, I was thinking about other examples of just dangerously bad play, and that of course, came to my mind. But, yeah, the Jets' backup quarterback, they have Josh Johnson as well, but Mike White, little-known.
Chris says Western Kentucky.
Yeah,
okay,
I remember him from college. I think he was at South Florida as well, but man, times are tough.
His stock photo looks like somebody who's just created, like a Madden guy who works on this game, just slid himself in the game.
A little Easter egg. It's not actually a real person.
Yes, exactly.
If I could say it.
All right.
Yo, who was the quarterback that started for the Rams and his picture, Wikipedia last year, was him chugging Natty Lights on top of a car? Do you not remember that?
No. No, wait. I remember he got hurt. He could run around, right? But he got hurt.
So the Rams guy's name was Walford, but the Arizona guy, because Kyler Murray got hurt, and it was backup versus backup in week 17.
That's right.
His name was Shrivenger or something. He was from South Dakota. That guy was a character.
Walford is
Walford is who I had on the brain too. That's right. Was he the guy chugging, or was it the S guy?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, before we dive too deep into this rabbit hole, let's pull out and look at the running back position, because we came into this weekend with some heavy expectations for Elijah Mitchell. We talked a lot about Elijah Mitchell in this Niners backfield. So everybody got hurt for the San Francisco 49ers backfield. Lofty, why don't you start and just kind of look at how to approach this entire mess now moving forward?
Poor Trey Sermon, man. It's on one hand, it's I was happy that he wasn't getting any work, because this was a guy that I was adamantly against in the offseason, right? And I was for Raheem Mostert, and that worked out great, right? It could have, who knows, but the guy's hurt already, so whatever. I was, draft Raheem Mostert a round and a half after Trey Sermon. But then I was even more vindicated when you saw that he wasn't even getting opportunities until both the backup to Raheem Mostert and the backup to the backup go down. But Trey Sermon, man, that's so unfortunate. Like, he comes in, he gets smoked. I mean, not just that helmet hit, which I don't know how you can avoid that if you're the Eagles, I'll be honest with you. But then the head and the neck just compacting into the ground. His neck just disappeared on impact. So Eli Mitchell's got the shoulder, and then Hasty's got an injury. This is just one where you monitor it. Now, I will say this, though. Eli Mitchell, despite not being particularly effective, because I do think this Eagles run defense is pretty decent, was getting the clear lion's share of opportunities. I mean, he picked up another 17 carries yesterday, Ben, and while he only had 42 yards, he was targeted twice on the ground, had 11 yards there, and then he went out, and then Hasty came in and got some, and then he went out, and then Sermon came in. But, I mean, it seems like Kyle Shanahan clearly intended on using Mitchell as the clear bell cow for the majority of that game, which he did when he was healthy.
Yeah, just a crazy situation where it's, one position like this and then Hasty goes down. I will say, when Trey Sermon fumbled, I thought he was doing the old, I know I fumbled, let me just make like I'm injured because it's my first carry. And then I saw the replay. Just a brutal situation, I guess. I mean, of course there's a wait and see element, but what happens if all of these guys are banged up for some time?
Trenton Cannon.
Not Trent Cannon.
Trent
Cannon. Okay.
Trent.
Yeah, that's a guy, a former New York Jet. I mean, obviously it's only dependent on if all these other guys are hurt, but someone's going to have to take these carries. I think Deebo Samuel will get some carries. Not that they're going to use him at running back, but they've been prone to do that. But someone's going to have to pick up these touches because the 49ers' identity is that, and they don't want Jimmy G. Jimmy G was running the ball yesterday, which is crazy.
I know.
Well, he kind of had to make up for just some brutal misses in that first half. Did see a trade question here, just real quick as we continue on the injuries. Lima W just traded Robbie Anderson and Melvin Gordon for Robert Woods. Win or loss? Mike Filippone wasted no time hitting him up with the L.
Yeah, it's a loss.
Ben? Loss?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I guess
he's not going to Hollywood. You're giving him an L?
Yeah, I mean, Robert Woods is in a buy low spot. I get it. I like Melvin Gordon.
Okay. Just curious.
For me,
I like when people.
For me, it's just people massively overvalue rookie running backs. And sometimes it works out. A lot of times it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Najee Harris had a stiff arm against a defender yesterday that was one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Like, offhand throws him into the sidelines. Like, hey, man, this guy is tough. He can run. He's strong. He's going to have himself some games. But Javonte Williams has 14 and 13 carries over his first 2 weeks, right? Melvin Gordon has 11 and 13. Are we to assume that Melvin Gordon begins to get phased out of the offense? Well, it's hard to look at like Mark Ingram or previous examples of this where they did. You have to be looking at what type of production they've seen. And thus far, I know Melvin Gordon had that 70-yard run, but thus far it's not like Javonte Williams has been markedly more effective than he has. So It's probably not the worst trade, honestly, now that I break it down, because Robbie Anderson, I anticipate his overall target share being down considerably from last year. But Robert Woods was losing snaps to Van Jefferson. And, I think Robert Woods is still going to have a good season. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't have, some small concerns about if he's going to be as good as he was in seasons past.
The other thing real quick is the Broncos are 2-0 and they play the Jets. Like, if they were just a disaster season, I could see them saying, let's just get this guy more and more touches. But they're going to be 3-0 most likely. So Melvin Gordon's going to stay in these plans, I think, longer than people anticipate.
That's a good point.
Yeah, especially when you look at that line for Denver, too. So, real quick, Darrell Henderson asked not only in the chat, but somebody that we wanted to bring up at the running back position. Looks like Dalvin Cook, with that ankle, plays through it. The numbers would reflect that. So let's look at Henderson, I think more so than not, as far as maybe any long-term concerns with that rib injury.
Yeah, that has been a perennial issue with Darrell Henderson. Can he stay healthy? I'll be honest with you, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal. But in the event that it is, Sony Michel is the guy. And even if you this is the problem, right? If you grab Sony Michel now, there's probably going to be somebody that overpays for him, and that's an issue because you probably only have him for a couple of weeks at best. And this upcoming matchup for the Rams is the Tampa Bay Bucks, which is a brutal matchup altogether. So if Sony Michel's on your waiver wire, I would love to tell you to grab him, but I'm at a stage right now where unless we know what Darrell Henderson's injury is before your waivers process, it's a stay away spot for me.
Sony Michel too is I get that they'd be content with giving him a lot of usage on the ground, but I don't think he's the ideal back for this type of offense, to be honest. He's more of a one-dimensional type of guy, and the way the Rams operate, I'm with you. It seems like maybe in a very specific circumstance if you're trying to spell a couple weeks, but a lot of things have to go right in terms of the matchups, what you're getting, making it the right budget and whatnot. So I get it. It's a crazy talking point. It's one of the main storylines coming out of it, but it doesn't seem like a serious injury. Again, ribs usually is not a major issue. It's more pain tolerance, just like with Tua. I think Henderson will be back sooner rather than later, and I don't know if Sony Michel will pay major dividends either.
So Gotti the machine, and it's a bigger picture question based on who is on your squad, I think more so than just a swap straight up. Hopefully he's not dealing with the handcuff scenario of Henderson and Michel. But Gotti _ sorry, I don't want to leave the underscore out, the machine, has Henderson in his league. Do you worry about putting him on the IR, or just kind of what you alluded to, Ben, where this is a short term, you kind of just have to stick him on the bench for a week or two and see how this plays out?
I personally, if you have the luxury of doing it, I would wait and see what happens. I think you'll get more clarity sooner rather than later with this. And then maybe you do have to stash him. But if not, I have a feeling there's a lot of scenarios where you don't want to overreact to this because it might not be that big a deal.
And there's a lot of leagues out there where you can't put someone on the IR unless they're actually on the IR. So I'm assuming this is one of the leagues where he can do that, but a lot of them you can't. So, I'm with you, Ben. Just wait a couple of days. There's a very good chance by later today or tomorrow we know exactly what's wrong with Darrell Henderson.
Right. So why be hasty now and make a decision that's going to burn you? By all means, a couple of wideouts to look at. We have a tight end, a pretty popular tight end across the board here for Jacksonville that popped up in some crunches. Did you see the eye roll, by the way, just now, Luffy, from Rasa? I think O'Shaughnessy burned Rasa's rear a couple of times over on a player prop. Is that right? I don't even know if we have time for Jarvis Landry and Russell Gage based on that look from O'Shaughnessy. My goodness.
I mean, it was just that kind of Sunday. He obviously didn't do a lot because when you get hurt and you don't play, it's very difficult to get production. I don't know. This was a guy we talked about as potential pickup. It was probably luxury. There was nothing, really there. It's just Jacksonville is a dumpster fire on many, many levels. So one of the guys that goes down, Eytan, I know you just mentioned, of course, the Browns receivers with Jarvis Landry, Odell potentially coming back. You got Peoples-Jones, Schwartz is banged up. That's one that's really difficult to peg right now, but one we definitely worth talking about.
Well, go ahead. You can start the convo with him.
I was trying to do the thing where I got to piggyback off you guys with this one because I really don't know what to make of it. When I think of the Browns, maybe it's just Lofty's been incepting me too much with this Chubb talk. I do think they want to just run the ball here, and he is so effective. Baker, at times, the volume is down, and I think they're going to be able to get by with that. I do think they've been very cautious with Odell. Should be back, especially now with Landry going down with the knee issue. Peoples-Jones hasn't done it yet, but it seems like he should be in line for more going forward, and I like him as a player. Then you got the tight ends as well, so I don't think it filters to one specific guy with this Browns passing attack, but clearly with Landry going down, it's going to open up some type of target share for these remaining players.
Do we know the extent of the injury with Landry yet?
I haven't seen it.
I'll tell you in a second. It doesn't look like it's anything definitive like we have with O'Shaughnessy week to week with that. It's an MCL sprain. So we've seen guys play through this. We've seen this be a nagging injury. We've seen some guys shut it down for a couple of weeks. Right now, he's week to week. I guess the big thing that I would ask and we've talked about this, Lofty, is how much does this directly impact Baker Mayfield?
A ton. I mean, that's their safety valve. And to Ben's point, maybe you start looking to the tight ends a little bit more. So this season, and just pull this up here real quick. This season, Jarvis Landry has ran 53% of his out of his routes, or lined up out of the slot 53% of the time. Higgins is at 45%, Peoples-Jones at 29%. They definitely move these guys around. And I don't really know Demetric Felton, I don't know how many snaps he played last game, but he has been in 67% of slot routes as well. So you're going to just see them move a lot of people around. I would assume that Peoples-Jones begins to get more of a role, but I would have thought that when Odell Beckham didn't play the first 2 games as well. So that to me is strange. And, Anthony Schwartz has been an outside guy, but in week 1, he was actually targeted relatively frequently. So this right now is just a mess because I don't have any confidence that any of these players are going to be targeted more or less than they were. And it looks like you're probably just going to see it spread around a lot more than it was. If you're looking for a waiver wire pickup, probably Peoples-Jones or Schwartz would be the guy. But outside of that, I don't really see anybody that I love here. And I'll throw this out there as well. I know Kareem Hunt was only targeted 1 time last game, but he's going to be involved more in the passing game. As Ben said, Nick Chubb averaging almost 7 yards per attempt this year because he's the GOAT. He is going to they're just going to run as much as they can. And in games where they fall behind, they'll spread it out. You'll see Hooper, you'll see Njoku, you'll see Schwartz, you'll see Peoples-Jones, you'll see Felton, you'll see all of these guys. And there's nobody I feel great about in this passing offense. And Odell should be back. Odell's the real winner here if he comes back at full capacity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're not going to see an uptick in throws unless the Browns are down significantly, right? It's not like there's going to be a 40 to 45 clip attempt for Baker Mayfield, at least onset with the script. So to your point about the ball being spread around, you're already dealing with kind of that situation of it being flexed. Real quick though, Luffy, you mentioned waiver wire and kind of looking at the Browns. Why don't we look at that now as we're winding down here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show? Again, take full advantage. Hit that thumbs up button first and foremost. Make sure you're subscribed to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, and then take full advantage as a new Yahoo DFS player. You see it right there at the top. You're going to get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum, and on top of that, you can take full advantage of everything we have across the board for Yahoo DFS tournaments, where we are going to prepare you for that with the Awesemo Plus Platinum and beyond. It's not just the NFL, of course, with your first deposit and paid contest entries. So why don't we start to look at a couple of waiver wire priorities? Lofty, you want to kick things off as we kind of wind down and still hit up a couple of questions if we can on the chat before we get out of here?
Yeah, for me, the biggest priority, no doubt, and I'm pulling it up right now to see just like where in Yahoo leagues, I want to see how owned he is because I know he'll be relatively owned, but nothing crazy. Wow. Okay. I'm sorry. Rostered, yes. Not owned.
It's a live show. We can't cut that up and replace it. Sorry.
Yeah, I must be careful. 34% rostered on Yahoo. That is way, way low for Rondale Moore. Now, I said after week 1, I didn't really know. I happy to admit when I'm uncertain of something. AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, all 3 of them clearly behind DeAndre Hopkins. And then you have Chase Edmonds as a pass catcher. You have Kyler Murray who can run. But this offense looks electric. And it appears as of now that Rondale Moore could become the number 2 option behind DeAndre Hopkins. And if that happens to be the case, this dude could be insane. I know Ben can speak to Rondale Moore because he knows that he had like 77% of his total yards came out. And you would probably know too, Eytan, you're a college guy. 77% of his total yards at Purdue came after the catch. And I know he had a lost season and he had 1 bad year. But this season, get this. This will blow your mind, okay? He has 183 yards. 157 of them have come after the catch. 157. Wow. Now, I know 1 was a long catch and run, but he made some great moves on that. That's 86%. 86% of his yards have come after the catch this year. The guy can absolutely make something out of nothing. and we might start to see the pecking order become a little bit more defined in Arizona. And if that's the case, Moore, who has 11 receptions on 13 targets, 182 yards, and 8 targets that led the team in week 2, this guy, you should be putting in aggressive bids to get Rondale Moore. That's how I feel about him this week.
Dynamic offense, and he's the type of player. The thing that we talked about this on the DFS show yesterday, the volume at times with so many other priorities can be difficult, but he's the type of guy, he only needs a couple of touches because he can turn a bubble screen. He can turn a slant into an 80-yard touchdown. Never mind if they, the other thing, Hopkins is always going to draw the top corner. He's always going to draw the elite coverage. Rondale Moore is poised to thrive in this offense. He's definitely not going to have consistency. He's more of like a best ball type luxury player in my mind, because he's going to have some performances where they don't turn into house calls and he has like 3 targets, 2 catches, 12 yards. But you got to be willing to live with that. This guy is electric. And at Purdue, I mean, he was one of, if not the best playmakers in the country. He's a really good player, and they got to steal with him.
And even if you aren't drafting him to start him each week, that's a guy you want on your bench. Like, there are going to be matchups where you go, I'm starting Rondale Moore this week.
Yeah. And I like him. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say his preseason total was 575.5. And you're looking at the big play element that can put you over that by week 8. But to your point, you could be sweating this out as well if you have a couple. But I'd much rather have him, to Lofty's point, I'd much rather have him on my bench than not, especially if you're dealing with situations where a starter gets hurt or maybe is struggling, and asking us in the chat, what do I do? What do I do? I've got this Rondale Moore kid on the bench. And then Lofty's like, what are you doing? You should be playing him. Come on. So I think that there's a ton of value there, but I just found it interesting how close he is to that total after 2 weeks. But to your point about it, Rasa, where he could easily just kind of fade out just because of the lack of volume as well.
He's got about a third of those yards already. I think he's all right.
Yeah, he's going to be good. On that offense,
we'll see. We'll come back to this, because in 6 weeks, if he's hovering at 500 or 400, we'll come back to that by any means. Anybody for you, Ben, that you are prioritizing on the waiver wire here?
So another guy kind of in that same bucket, I think, with Rondale Moore is we talked about earlier. Henry Ruggs is showing that he's got some skills, and if Derek Carr can get him the ball, there's no doubt about it. Obviously, JaMychal Hasty, that's an if statement. If he's the only one, if he's the lone survivor, certainly anyone in San Francisco's backfield that has it to themselves is going to be worth it. But Henry Ruggs has shown, I didn't think that Derek Carr would be able to get him the ball where he needs it, which is he's a burner. He's that type of home run play. We've seen already that maybe that's not the case. So if the Raiders offense is going to continue to operate like this, you've got Jacobs, you've got Waller. Now you've got the third level with Ruggs. He's going to be similar to Rondale Moore, explosive at times, and you definitely want to pay attention to that. It's going to be a popular name this week.
All right. Let me throw one out, and it's not meant to go into deep conversation. I'm just kind of curious, rapid fire, because of the day that we saw, a little banged up to Russell Gage there as well, who did come back. But what are your thoughts on any type of movement, especially if available on the waiver wire, for somebody in Cordero Patterson, where rushing, receiving, it doesn't have to be a big amount of volume, but clearly with question marks about Mike Davis and this offense that took a week, maybe week and a half to really get going, he was part of that. He doesn't have to be a full-time player to get some scores. So I'm just curious on the way out, your thoughts on Patterson.
I think he's a perfectly reasonable pickup. I don't see there being an instance where he's just taking over in the backfield for Mike Davis, but I think we could be working our way closer to a split. And in terms of pass catching opportunities, don't ignore Mike Davis still caught all 7 of his passes. He's not efficient on them, only 25 yards, but he's now been targeted 13 times in 2 games. So Cordero Patterson has played 24 snaps in back-to-back games. He will get on the field. He's going to get some chances. He'll probably be a 10-touch per game guy. And I think for someone he's a playmaker. Like, Cordero Patterson can make plays. So, I have no problem picking him up. Not putting an aggressive bid on them there. You still have Davis. You still have Ridley. You still have Michael Pitts. So there are Kyle Pitts. Sorry, you still have all of those guys, but as someone that can make plays and break one from time to time, I think Patterson's fine. I wouldn't put him at the top of my list, though.
I think I'm a little more skeptical. I'll be honest. He ran pretty hot with touchdowns. I don't think the volume is going to be there in any major capacity, no matter what happens, because Mike Davis's skill set and his kind of overlap. It's not like he'll carve out a strictly like pass catching role because Mike Davis can't catch. He certainly can. So Patterson is a playmaker. He can be explosive. But I worry a little that you're going to need to run pretty hot like you needed to do yesterday with him falling in the end zone here and there.
J-Dog says, I don't trust Ruggs. I'll take Patterson over Ruggs. You're nuts, bro.
No.
No, I'm sorry. You're outside of Darren Waller in the passing game. Who do you have? Like, okay, sure, Renfro's going to have what game here or there, Brian Edwards. Ruggs could end up being a guy that is in your starting lineup every single week. We don't know, but he could be. The likelihood of Cordarrelle Patterson being in your starting lineup every week is 0% unless you have an awful team. That's simple.
Yeah, that's a great point. Unless you're drafting with a bunch of sharps, and you shouldn't be in that league anyway if that's the case. At Lofty_D, at JazzRaz DFS, at Shander Show for me. Fellas, thank you. We're back on Friday with another edition. We'll handle all your start and sits for week 3 in the NFL. Thanks to Chris and thanks to Yahoo. Take full advantage of that 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum on your first deposit and paid contest entry. Have a great week. You are fully prepared for week 3, so no excuses on our end. Thanks again.